As far as high school football players go, only 2% are offered college scholarships at Power 5 schools. That means if you take a random group of 1,000 high school players, only 20 of the 1,000 will play football on that big stage. That's a pretty special group. My guess, Terry Luck, was one of the 20. To take it to another level, only 0.2% of high school football players make it to the NFL. Out of a group of 1,000 players, there would be only 2. Terry Luck is also part of that much smaller group. Interestingly, Terry Luck was offered college scholarships at major universities in baseball, basketball, and football. I don't know what the odds are of 3 sports scholarship offers, but I do know Dean Smith, the iconic basketball coach at the University of North Carolina, was disappointed Terry chose to play football at Nebraska instead of playing basketball for the North Carolina Tar Heels. Dean Smith even continued to write him notes after he was enrolled at the University of Nebraska. Terry Luck is special. To say this now 70-year-old man had athletic ability would be a huge understatement. In the next few minutes, we will talk lots of football here. You will hear behind-the-scenes stories from a guy who lived and breathed football at the highest levels. He later also would have great ability in the business world. As senior vice president of the company where he was employed for many years, he appeared to be in line to be president. But after much consternation and prayer, he and his wife Janice decided to trade the potential business world ability for availability, all for the cause of Christ. They took a major leap of faith along with a major pay cut with 3 kids in college to coach football at a small Christian high school so he could be available, not only to use his football knowledge, but more importantly, impact kids for eternity. Sounds like a story right out of the Bible, right? Well, maybe so. But after a couple of years of trying to get a football program turned around, Terry was abruptly fired. They had walked way out on the faith limb, and the limb had broken in half. If you're a faith-walking person, you know that can happen. Thankfully, there's a smiling God waiting to catch faith-walking people when we fall. And thankfully, his ways are higher than our ways. If Terry Luck had to do it all over again, he would do exactly the same, even knowing the limb would break. I'm not sure how many of us would do that. Maybe 20 out of 1,000, or maybe just 2 out of 1,000. Those odds never bothered this man. He began with elite ability, but these days his focus is on elite availability. Only heaven knows how many people will be there because of Terry's ability and availability. From ability to availability, that makes for an interesting journey and an interesting podcast episode.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. I got my old buddy Terry Luck on the phone right with me. Terry is the former quarterback for the Nebraska Cornhuskers and also former quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. So you guys pull up a chair and listen. You're going to hear 2 old codgers having a conversation. Terry, thank you for doing this. I hope you can hear me.
I can, Bruce. And listen, thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you for doing it. I met Terry, I don't know, had to be in the early 80s, I think, Terry, when you came down to Reynolds, Georgia to play in the craziest golf tournament of them all, the Chicken George. I know you remember those days, right?
You know what? I do remember those days, and I had the pleasure of playing in it. Gosh, Bruce, I want to say 3 or 4 times. And every time I went down and played in it, I had more fun than I did the previous year.
That thing was billed as golf in its purest form, and you about needed a helmet to go out on that little 9-hole golf course. You had scratch golfers, and you had people that didn't know which end of the golf club to hold. I actually did a podcast on the Chicken George, and I had my brother George, who you know well. I had him talking through some of that, and it was. I even had some audio from some of us were running around being sportcasters one year, so I brought some of that in. So that's out here on this channel, but those were crazy times. We were much younger then. Terry, I think you told me you turned 70 in December. Is that right?
That's correct.
So
that's correct.
I'll be 69 in September, so we're about whatever that is, a year and a half apart. So, folks, you're listening to a couple of old guys that we were just talking before we hit the button record here, that we spend most of our time trying to figure out which doctor we got to go to, and that's part of life, isn't it, Terry?
It certainly is part of life, and the more I think about it, and I know this is when the enemy gets to me, it ticks me off. I start thinking back, wait a minute, I know I've had several knee surgeries and all that. I know I'm getting old, but it still ticks me off.
So, yeah, and because you don't feel, I don't feel like I'm 69 years old. I don't, but I know I am. I mean, in my head, I don't feel it, but I feel it in my body. I just put it that way. Sometimes it's hard to get up and get moving and all that kind of stuff. So, folks, we're going to talk some football here. This is a solid human being. He's done a lot for a lot of people. He's had a heck of a career. We'll talk about all that. Terry, let's go back. You grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is that right?
That's correct. We moved there when I was in the first grade, and that's where all my family. I mean, I've got some cousins that live in Charlotte and Raleigh and those, but basically we moved there when I was in the first grade, and I grew up there, and my two brothers still live there. So, yeah, that's home.
Talk about growing up. I know I'm curious. I know others will be curious. How does a guy growing up in a town figure out and end up being an NFL quarterback? It's got to be an interesting story. Talk about your parents and your interest in sports as a kid. Just talk a little bit about how all that developed.
My mom and dad got a divorce when I was 1. I got an older brother, Ronnie. He's 4 years older than me. So when my mom and dad divorced, we moved back into my grandmother's home in a real small town called Erwin, Erwin, North Carolina. And then we stayed there with my grandmother. I mean, she was like part of our extended family. My mother worked, Ronnie went to school, and then my grandmother kept me. My mother remarried when I was 8. She remarried when I was 8. We moved to Fayetteville. That's how we got to Fayetteville. I always liked sports. I mean, I'll say this, some of that was due to my older brother, Ronnie, who was a good athlete, not a great athlete, but he was a good athlete. Played football, basketball, baseball. He was a pitcher. He was a wide receiver and punter. And he was a shooting guard in basketball, and he was my hero. I mean, I'd go watch him play, and he might score 25 in a basketball game. And I thought, wow, I've never seen anybody as good as him, you know. Right. Needless to say, I was biased, but he was like my hero. Well, once I started catching up with him from a standpoint of height, he was only probably 5'11". I started catching up with him, and then when I got in the 9th grade, I mean, I was 6 feet, 165. I remember our head football coach on the varsity came up to me one day in class and said, I just want to let you know, you're going to be our starting quarterback next year on the varsity. And I'm 14, and I remember the first night I ran out there, I was scared to death, but I learned a heck of a lot that first night. Wow. So really, I go through my high school career. Ronnie, my freshman year, he ended up getting a scholarship to pitch at Pembroke State University, which is now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. And so I'm in high school by myself. We didn't have a weight in the whole school. Didn't know what lifting weights were. I mean, they just didn't have them.
Right.
You know, we didn't do it back then. And so I had a real strong arm, always been able to throw the ball a long, long way, and just enjoyed it. I mean, I miss throwing today. I've got a torn rotator in my right shoulder, and I miss throwing the football today, even when I'm coaching. I mean, I miss it. So I go through high school. I'd made All-State in football and basketball and baseball. We were not very good. I'd gone to a school, great school, you know, a lot of history, but our school stayed the same size. We had about 800 in high school. Well, all the other schools around us in our region, you know, were building new schools, and they were having 1,300 students. Well, we just couldn't compete. I mean, there were 2 football games in high school. We dressed out 13 players.
Wow.
I mean, we just couldn't compete. So I was fortunate that I could do some things. And again, I'll give a lot of credit to Ronnie. You know, I could punt and I could kick, and that just made it easy. I ran back punts, ran back kickoffs. And it wasn't because I was a speed demon, because I wasn't. I guess our coach knew that he could trust me with the football.
You play in this little school where you were not winning, and then you had to be recruited by a lot of people to end up at the University of Nebraska. I mean, that was a powerhouse in football for sure then, right?
In 1970, which was my junior year in high school, they won the national championship, beat LSU. And that was my senior year in high school. My freshman year at Nebraska, we won the national championship. So that was 2 years in a row, and freshmen couldn't play on the varsity at that time.
Right, that's true.
So I got it's a different issue now, Bruce. You know, now you could have a grandson going out hitting balls off the roof of the Astrodome or whatever, and now somebody in Seattle could see that this afternoon.
Right.
Back then, you had to put it in some, I think it was 8 or maybe 16 millimeter cans, tape it up, and then send it. It would take a week and a half to get there. You had to put it on a film. I mean, it was very cumbersome.
I can't imagine that they recruited you coming from a school that was that small with that small of a team.
Well, I tell you what, when all was said and done, I had gone to a couple of football camps. One was at Wake Forest. I want to say the other one might have been at North Carolina State or someplace like that. And of course, other coaches will come and work the camp just to recruit. And I just remember the second day that we were in camp at Wake Forest, the quarterback coach from Michigan State came up to me and introduced himself. His name was Al Doro, and he was the quarterback coach when Duffy Daugherty was the head coach at Michigan State. So he said, Terry, were you thinking about going to school? I said, Coach, I really don't know. And again, Bruce, Ronnie was doing his thing at college, you know, making grades, pitching. My mother was working to pay the bills, and I really didn't have anybody to talk with. You know, I mean, I didn't have someone I could pick up the phone and go, hey, listen, I'm getting recruited, and, you know, how should I go about? I really didn't.
Right.
So anyway, I told Coach Doro, I said, I really don't know, Coach. He said, we want you to come up and visit Michigan State. And I said, well, gosh, I'd love to. I did that, and all of a sudden, I start getting more letters. Well, in 1 week, I got letters from Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Miami, Kentucky, Virginia, and I mean, it's just like they all came in.
So those letters came as a result of you going to the camp at Michigan State?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. And then word of mouth, I guess. But at the end, when all was said and done, I had 40 football scholarship offers. I had 10 baseball, and I had 10 basketball.
Wow.
And I remember sitting in my hometown in Fayetteville, and they had invited, some of the local colleges had invited all the football players that were being recruited out of Fayetteville. Well, there were about 40 or 50 of us. I mean, we had a big, it was almost like an area of the state. It was just really strong in football. I remember sitting there, and Dean Smith came up to the microphone, and he said, for all you Carolina fans, I just want to let you know we're very, very close in signing Tom McMillan. Tom was he later became, I think, a congressman, but he was the number one recruit, left-handed, big 6'10" guy, and everybody went crazy. And then I saw Coach Smith started looking back toward our area, and he came back. He said, Terry. I said, hey, Coach, how are you? He said, I'm good. He said, could we talk? I said, absolutely. So we go over in the corner, just a quality, top-notch guy. And he said, we're real interested in you coming to Carolina to play basketball. And I said, well, Coach, I said, I bleed Carolina blue in basketball. I can tell you that. I said, now I'm going to tell you, it doesn't bleed as much blue in football, but I love Carolina basketball.
And folks, he's talking about Dean Smith, a famous basketball coach for North Carolina Tar Heels that people our age and anybody in the sports knows who he's talking about. And so, wow. Let
me tell you what he did to show you the kind of a class guy he was. In his will, he left $250 for every player that ever played for him, that when he died, that they could take their wife out to a nice dinner.
Wow.
And let me tell you this, for about 3 or 4 years after I graduated college, and he sent me a couple when I was a junior and senior, he would send me a handwritten note. Terry, hope you're doing well. Please give my best to your mother, wow. Dean Smith. Just a classy, top-notch guy.
So I know that had to be hard to turn that down, right? How did you switch gears to go to play football after that?
It was very hard, very hard. I originally, Bruce, had signed to go to Wake Forest. Wake Forest was 2.5 hours from Fayetteville.
Right.
My mother was a single mom who had remarried, and now I had a 2-year-old brother. That I basically helped raise. I would get him up, feed him, dress him, take him to preschool before I made my biology class at school.
Everybody's got a story. This guy, he's talking about having a single mother, raising a little brother, doing everything he had to do. He was obviously a great athlete, ended up playing football at University of Nebraska, Big Ten, powerhouse, and then playing for the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. Wow, that's all I can say.
I mean, mother had to work. I mean, she was the breadwinner. Like I said, I got recruited by a guy named Wright Anderson. Great guy, excellent coach, and he did all the right things. I mean, he really did. So Cal Stoll was the head coach at Wake Forest at the time. The weekend I went to Wake Forest, they had retired the jersey of Brian Piccolo.
Wow.
So I had a chance to meet. I had a chance to meet Brian's wife and his 2 beautiful little girls. That was an emotional. They did a real nice job at Wake. Well, I get back from Wake Forest. I had signed a letter of intent, and I get a call from a guy named Jim Walden. And Coach Walden said, Terry, I'm from Amory, Mississippi, but I'm coaching at Nebraska. I've seen your film. He was the first one that said this to me. He said, in every film that I see, you're the star of the film. Wow. And I said, Coach, I said, I appreciate that. I said, you're not trying to sell me on anything, are you? He said, I'm trying to sell you on coming out here and visiting us. I said, well, I'll do that. Bruce, I went out there, I think it was February. It was so cold. And we got in, and they were having the
Lincoln, Nebraska, right?
Lincoln, Nebraska. They were having the state basketball tournament. They always had it in Lincoln. So I'm there during that tournament. And so I'm watching as many games as I can watch I want to see the athletes and, who was doing what. I went in to see Coach Devaney, and he said, Terry, he said, I'm so glad that you came for a visit. He said, we want you to come here.
So Coach Devaney was the head coach of Nebraska for several years before Tom Osborne came, right?
Yeah, he came there in, I want to say, 62.
Right, okay.
And he just, when Coach Devaney got there, things just changed. Right. I mean, from people I talked with to everything I read. And then he actually hired Coach Osborne. Coach Osborne had played a year in the NFL with the Washington Redskins. And then he came back to Lincoln, and I think he might have worked on his master's or maybe his doctorate, because he was a doctor. He came back and I think was the quarterback coach. And then I think it was 69, they made him the offensive coordinator. So
he was coaching you pretty close right when you came, sure, before he became head coach. And folks, Tom Osborne, sure, legendary football coach, if you don't know, I think he won like 255 games or something. He had a winning percentage, probably 85% or something.
Yeah,
this was a powerhouse. This was a powerhouse.
Yeah. I came back home. I loved the trip. I came back home, and I remember coming back on the plane, and I thought, you know what, Terry? If you think you're one of the better quarterbacks in the United States, why don't you go to the best school in the United States that just won a national championship? So I'm tugging emotionally with that.
I'm sure.
Coming back on the plane, and I get back, and Mother picks me up at the airport, and she said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I mean, it was, when you look up there and you see those national champion. Yeah.
But banners or whatever, yeah.
And Coach Devaney, who was about 5'7", there's a picture, Bruce, and you can relate to this. There was a picture behind Coach Devaney's desk on the wall that showed him walking on water. Somebody out in western Nebraska had drawn this. And they did the same thing with Coach Bryant at Alabama. So anyway, I came home and said, Mother, are you going to be disappointed if I go to Nebraska that far away? She said, Terry, it'd be great for you to go close, but I don't want to hold you back on anything. I want you to go where you're going to be happy. So she answered the right way.
Yeah.
So about 3 days later, I pick up the phone and call Coach Walden and say, Coach, I'm coming. He said, well, I tell you what, I'll be there in about 3 days to sign you. So I pick up the phone and call Coach Anderson. I said, Coach.
At Wake Forest, right?
Yeah. I said, Coach, I just want to thank you for your interest you've shown in me. And I feel like you were always straight shooter with me. And I just want to thank you. He said, Terry, you sure you're making the right decision? I said, I do believe, I mean, I know I'll get a great education at Wake, but also I know I'd get a great education. The great education doesn't come from the books. The great education comes from you sitting in those classes doing what you're supposed to do.
Right. That's true.
And so he said, Terry, I'm so disappointed. I said, well, Coach, I appreciate it. So anyway, Coach Walden shows up, and my high school coach and my mother, and we sit down and sign the papers.
Back in those days, you couldn't play as a freshman. You were on the freshman team, right?
That's correct. Started my freshman year on the team. We went undefeated, set some records. And you know what, Bruce? There were not, I'm going to say maybe 35 or 40 schools, and that's a guess, that had freshman teams. Let me tell you this was sad. My freshman year, the third game of the season, Wichita State comes to play us in Lincoln. It's cold, it has rained, and I mean, we've got AstroTurf, but when you got tackled, it just formed a wave that came over you, and it would take your breath, and you'd have blue lips and all that stuff. But you got to understand now, that was the year after they had the plane crash, and they lost just about their whole football team. They had to go back out and give more scholarships, not the blue chippers, Right. I mean, they had to give them to some brown chippers, I guess, or whatever they called them. But I mean, we got up on them, and we had a good freshman team. I mean, we had a good freshman team. We had, Bruce, I'm going to say we probably had 10 guys on our freshman team that ultimately made All-American on the varsity.
Wow.
And we were up on them 35-0 at the end of the first quarter.
Well, man, that's a fan base that's like Georgia's fan base now. There were some rabid fans out there. That was an unbelievable experience, wasn't it?
The biggest crowd I'd ever played against was I played in the North Carolina, South Carolina Shrine Bowl my senior year in high school. And it was played at a small stadium that probably seated, I'm going to say maybe 15,000. That was the biggest crowd I'd ever played in front of.
So now you're playing before how many in Nebraska?
Well, at that time, the stadium held 67,000.
Right.
And then my redshirt sophomore year, it went up to 76,000. Then I think they went to 90,000. And I think right now they're at 95,000. I just remember coming out, we were messing around one day. This was after I'd had my third knee surgery, and I'm out at practice walking around. Back then, they put you in a straight leg cast for 6 or 8 weeks. And so I'm standing around practice just throwing, and a big booster, Buzz Whitehead. Buzz said, "Terry, can you throw it up in the upper deck?" I said, "Gosh, Buzz, I don't know." He said, "Well, I'm betting $100 that you can." And I said, "Well, would you do me a favor?" I said, "Because of the width of the stadium, give me a couple of throws to kind of get my bearings, because, when you let it go, you start thinking, oh, that's way up there." Well, then it lands in the 30th row on the lower deck. I said, I don't know. So I hit, 2 or 3 balls, and it didn't get up there. And then finally I thought, I just got to hunker down. So I finally threw the ball up, and it landed on about the 7th or 8th row. It only had, I think, 10 or 12 rows in the upper deck. He said, "Yeah, Terry." I said, "Buzz, you didn't care if I threw it up there. You just wanted to win $100." He said, "That's right. That's right."
So, what's amazing, as far as you could throw the ball, college football is different than it is now, especially in Nebraska. That was a run and attack, right?
Well, let me tell you, what the ideal game for us was? Ideal game for us was us rush for 300 yards and quarterbacks pass for about 150, maybe 175 yards. Wow. That was the ideal thing right there. So, yeah, we were going to run it 70 to 75% of the time because, quite honestly, other than Oklahoma, our front seven was better than anybody else's. And we just had some big old strong kids who got in the weight room. We had a great weight coach in Boyd Epley. Boyd is still there. He has spawned, gosh, Bruce, no telling how many weight coaches throughout the United States.
How often do you go back there? Do you still go back for games every now and then?
Bruce, let me tell you, you know how many times I've been back there? 2 times. 2 times since I graduated in 1976. I've been back 2 times. I went back when I worked for the ad agency. I went back for a training seminar the year of OJ. Was that 94?
I don't know, but I remember it.
And then I went back not too long after that. Joe Burrow, or you've heard of Joe.
Yeah. Who
plays quarterback with the Bengals. Okay, Joe's daddy, Jimmy, and I were roommates and teammates at Nebraska.
How about that?
And I'd been talking to Jimmy. He said, man, he was coaching at Nebraska. Jimmy was coaching at the defensive backs. He said, Terry, man, why don't you come out here for homecoming? We're playing Kansas. You can stay with us. And okay, so I thought it would be a good way for Janice to connect the dots. So I took Janice and my youngest daughter, Madison, who was 9, and we drove to Lincoln and stayed with Jimmy. Joe was a little old 5-year-old whiny kid.
Yeah.
He was handsome, but he was 5. He didn't want to brush his teeth. A typical 5-year-old.
He played at LSU, right?
Yeah, started out at Ohio State.
Started at Ohio State, yep.
And then he transferred. But I've only been back 2 times. And you know what? I'm ashamed to say that.
Give a couple of stories about certain games you were in that you never forgot. I know you got a ton of football stories. People find it interesting from the quarterback in Nebraska, certain games, big games you were in.
The first story would be my very first college game. We had not, like I said, in high school, we were not very good. I didn't see any just great, off-the-chart athletes. There were some good athletes we competed against, but, so the very first game we played, we had to take a bus ride to Columbia, Missouri, and play Missouri. Well, that was serious stuff.
Right. Oh, yeah.
They were.
I've been there. I've been in that stadium.
Okay,
yeah.
So you know.
Yeah.
They were the most physical team I've ever played against. I was more beat up after that game than any game I ever played in.
Big time elite college football at that point, right?
No doubt.
Yeah.
And I just remember I went out and, matter of fact, I was 12 for 21 for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I'll never forget that because I don't think I ever threw for over 200 yards in high school.
Right.
And the windows that you throw in, they close a lot faster at that level.
I'm sure.
And they close even faster when you get
to the NFL level.
My God.
I can't imagine.
That just stuck out to me because we went up on them 18-0. And then all of a sudden we come out in the second half. It starts kind of raining, I don't mean hard, but and our varsity was sitting up in the stands watching us play. Now you got to understand, in the history of the school, we had never lost a freshman team game. Had never lost.
Oh, wow. So
all of a sudden, Missouri goes down and punches us in the mouth, and we're behind 23-18. Coach Devaney comes down out of the stands, and he gathers all the freshmen on the sideline, and he told us, "Let me tell you guys this. We didn't bring you here to get your butts beat." He didn't say butts. "Get your butts beat." He said, "So you better buckle it on, and you better make something happen." Well, honest to goodness, as soon as he walked off the field, the skies opened up, and it was just as blue could be. The sun was back out. We had the ball on our probably 7-yard line. Coach Walden, who was our head freshman coach, he sent in a play. We were going to run 71 fullback screen. I thought, golly, we're going to throw this out of our own end zone. So I dropped back, and we had a big old fullback that ended up making All-American as a linebacker on varsity, first-round draft choice for Buffalo. And I threw it to Tom, and he took off. And you got a big old 245-pound fullback running about 4'6", and he took that thing down to about the 2-yard line. I sneaked it in. We tie it 23-23. We intercept the pass. I throw a touchdown pass, and the bottom line was we ended up coming back winning 31-23.
And that was your first collegiate game as a freshman, right?
Right.
Wow.
And so Coach Walden came to me, and everybody else, had kind of already left. I'm sitting there kind of putting my stuff away. And he sat down beside me, patted me on the leg. He said, "Hey, bud," he said, "that's the reason I brought you here, because I know you could do that." And I said, "Well, Coach, awesome. I appreciate that." I said, "I appreciate your confidence." So that was the first biggie that I remember.
Folks, we're talking to Terry Luck. He's a former Nebraska quarterback, former NFL quarterback with the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to get one more story, and then I want to move a little bit to the NFL and then let him talk about his life a little bit and what he's doing these days.
After my freshman year during spring ball, so you move up to varsity, spring ball, there was a guy in front of me, 2 years ahead of me, by the name of David Hum. David was a left-hander from Las Vegas. Very, very good quarterback. I had several people from my hometown tell me not to go to Nebraska because they had the greatest guy that ever played. Well, I thought, he can't be that good, and he doesn't have wings and all that. So I go in my first passing drill as a varsity player, plant my back foot, and I felt like somebody shot me in the knee. I didn't know what the deal was. I thought, what in the world? I never missed a game in my life in 4 years in high school.
Right.
In any sport. I drop back, don't get hit. This is skeleton, and plant my back foot, and it just explodes. So I tear my ACL and both pieces of cartilage. So from that point for the next 2 years, I'm in the hospital about 8 times, having surgery, doing manipulations, having to go back in and trim some cartilage. I mean, it was just crazy. Plus, I got staph. And they had not seen staph a whole lot back in 1973.
Wow. So
the doctor came in and told me, he said, Terry, said, I'm concerned you might lose your leg. And I said, well, Doc, we can't let that happen. I said, I have all the confidence in the world in you. I said, but can I make a special request? I don't know how unique this is. I said, but could you send me to the Mayo Clinic? Maybe they got a fresh set of eyes. And I said, I came here to play. I didn't come here to have knee surgeries. I didn't come here to cost money. I came here to play, and I want to play. And I'll get out of this cast, and I'll rehab my leg, and I'll be ready to compete at the highest level. So they talked about it, and of all places they send me to the team doctor at the University of Oklahoma, which were our bitter rivals.
Right.
So I go down there, he tests for 2 days, Dr. Don O'Donoghue, and he said, Terry, you've either been having knee surgery or rehabbing from knee surgery for the last 2 years. I said, that's right. He said, I want you to sit out a year. I said, Doc, hold up. I can't sit out a year. He said, yeah, you can. You can just redshirt, and you'll have 2 years left. So, Bruce, I have to sit out another year. And then my junior year, I come back. I'm the backup quarterback. David is starting. And, of course, he's gotten better.
Right.
I do some mop-up rolls against Wisconsin, Kansas, those kind of things.
Right.
Then we get to the Sugar Bowl, 1974. We're going up against Florida. They got some kids down there that can just flat run, and they're running the wishbone. So we go down there. David is being hyped for the Heisman. He had a good year.
Right.
And so we go down there. I'd gotten food poisoning. I'd lost like 18 pounds the week of the game. We get in the game. They're punching us in the mouth. I had never seen anybody do that to us, other than Oklahoma. Oklahoma did it the previous year. But David throws 4 interceptions in the first half. He is 2 for 10 for about 12 yards and 4 interceptions. So Florida takes the ball. They're driving down. And on 4th down, with 1 yard to go for a touchdown, my roommate, Jimmy Burrow, Joe's daddy, comes up and makes a tackle on the 1 yard line. Well, all of a sudden, I hear somebody saying, Terry. I turned around. It's Coach Osborne. I said, yes, sir. He said, get your helmet on. You're going.
Wow.
Now, think about this.
The Sugar Bowl.
I said, you know what I said to him? I said, are you kidding me? That's what I said to him. He said, no, I'm serious. So I said, okay. Well, I run on the field. Place was packed. Place was just packed.
I'm sure.
And so when we get in our huddle.
New Year's Eve. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, bunch of drunk people, too.
Sure.
And so I stand in the huddle, getting ready to call the play. And I look down, we're 8 yards back in the end zone. So we line up and we drive at 99 2/3 yards for a touchdown. And Tony Davis, our fullback, who we came in together at Nebraska, he was about 5'9" and weighed about 215, but he was just a bulldog, and he just went nuts. Well, he rushed for 137 yards. About 120 of that was in the second half. And we kick off to them. We hold them. We take it back down again, about 45-yard drive. Mike Coyle, who was our kicker, comes in, kicks a field goal. So it's 10-10 now with about 6 minutes to go in the ball game. We hold them again. We have probably about a 35, 40-yard drive. Tony goes crazy. We run a little trap. He hits a couple of those defensive backs and just smashes their face mask. We bring Mike back out, and he kicks a field goal. I almost get emotional.
Oh, my goodness.
I almost get emotional talking about it now because I look back and see, all the hours we put in.
Oh, yeah. That was
the weightlifting.
50 years ago you're talking about,
oh,
at
my
least.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Tony had going through 2 knee surgeries and several of our other guys. So it was just so sweet to come back and win that thing 13-10.
And so that was your junior year. So you came back and had a senior year where you guys, what you did, lose one game your senior year or something?
Well, we went into the Fiesta Bowl 10-1.
Yeah.
We got beat by Oklahoma.
Okay.
We went in 10-1, and then Fiesta Bowl. It was 17-14. We're playing against Arizona State. They got Mike Haynes. They got some great players. And we're going in for the winning touchdown, and we run a 79 one-delay fullback flare. And Tony flares out. I hit him. He was a great receiver. I hit him. He's running in for a touchdown, and the ball hits on his thigh pad, and he drops it on about the 8-yard line.
Oh, my.
And we get beat 17-14. I think we
my.
ended up 6th in the nation, something like that. But
so you obviously, after that career with Nebraska, and I know you got a lot more stories, you went to NFL even with all your knee problems.
the draft comes around. I get a call from 3 teams. I get a call from New England, I get a call from Pittsburgh, and I get a call from Philadelphia. And they all tell me, Terry, we're very interested in you. You'll go by the 3rd round.
Wow.
So I said,
how many rounds did they have then?
25 rounds back then. Matter of fact, it might have been more than that because I think Brian Sight, who ended up being our starter in Cleveland, ended up getting drafted in the 27th round. We have this little get together and, the guys that are going to get drafted. Tony goes in the 4th round. We had 2 linebackers that went in the 1st round. I mean, they were just, 6'5", 245, ran 4.5, 4.6 40s. I mean, just some specimens. So I'm sitting there. They get through the 1st round. They get through the 2nd round. They get through the 3rd round. My name doesn't get called. Well, I get called at the beginning of the 4th round by the guy who was the player personnel for the New England Patriots. He said, Terry, introduced himself. His name was Art Hadhazy, Hadhazy. He said, I guess you're kind of wondering why you hadn't come off the board. I said, well, yeah, I am. He said, let me tell you something. We had every intention of bringing you to New England. And he said, we liked you. The coaches loved you. We loved your arm strength, all of that. He said, but Coach Fairbanks, who was the head coach at the time, had been the head coach at Oklahoma when I was going through my knee stuff.
Right.
And he said he was so afraid that even though I had played 2 years with my knee, he said, I'm so afraid that we give this guy 4th round money, which was, it might have been $35,000.
Yeah, nothing like it is now, yeah.
That's right. You give this guy money and he comes in, and the first week in camp, he goes down with a knee. It makes us look bad. He said, when we didn't take you in the 4th round, everybody else across the board, they think, they know something we don't know. They know something we don't know. So I didn't get drafted. Right. And I get a call from the guy from Cleveland. And he said, Terry, said, I know you're disappointed. I said, I am disappointed. And I said, I'm a little angry. Right. He said, why is that? I said, because you know what? And I was ticked off.
Yeah.
All of you all missed out. I said, you all missed out. I said, because there's no doubt in my heart that I can play on Sunday. No doubt. Right. And he said, well, here's what I want to do. I want to bring you to Cleveland. I said, you mean for a tryout? He goes, no. I want to bring you to Cleveland. I want to give you a contract. I want to bring you to Cleveland. I want you to come up here for our rookie camp, which was a week later. So I go up there. Forrest Gregg is our head coach. Forrest Gregg. Tough. I mean, tough. He told me at the end of camp, he said, Terry, as long as I've got a job, you got a job. He said, I appreciate your story. Appreciate your story, working your way back, It shows me a lot about who you are and your character and all that. So Forrest and I became pretty tight. It was big time business.
Oh, yeah.
It was big time business.
You threw for, I think I saw over 300 yards that year, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, Brian Sipe was our starter, no doubt.
Right.
We had a guy named Dave Mason, a black guy, went to Southern. He was our second guy, and I was our third guy.
Yeah.
And so we go and we're playing. We go to Pittsburgh. And, of course, that's when they have Bradshaw, Franco.
The Steel Curtain and all that.
Oh God. I mean, they just have an unbelievable Rocky Blyer, all that stuff. So we go over there. And in the first quarter, Brian gets sacked, I want to say by L.C. Greenwood. Brian got sacked and broke his shoulder blade. And then all of a sudden it started snowing snowballs that were big as softballs. Brian comes out. They send David in. We go in halftime. We're down 28-0. Forrest comes in. And I knew when Forrest was mad. He comes in, and they had punched us in the mouth in the first half. They just punched us in the mouth. A couple of fights broke out. That was typical Pittsburgh, Cleveland. And he said, "Close the door." And I thought, uh-oh. Now, I didn't look at him. Only thing I had done at that time, we hadn't scored any points, so I hadn't held for any extra points or field goals. So I knew I hadn't messed up. So he said, I've been involved in football for 32 years. Well, the more he talked, Bruce, the madder he got, the madder he got, the madder he got. And then he grabbed one of those lockers off the wall. He tears it off the wall, and he breaks that thing into 1,000 pieces. I mean, wood and metals flying everywhere. And he said, I cannot believe it. We don't make those guys punt. They're good, but they're not that good. We go out in the second half, score 28 straight points. David lights it up. He does. Score 28 straight points. It's 28-28. And in about 2 minutes to go in the ball game, a little guy named Roy Girella, the kicker, he runs on the field in his little soccer shoes and kicks the field goal. And we get beat. I think it was 31-28.
We're talking to Terry Luck. We're going to change gears. Nebraska quarterback, Cleveland Brown quarterback. You just played 1 year in the NFL, right?
I got hurt. I was playing against Seattle in the last game of the season. I started the last game of the season and played against Seattle. We got beat, I think, 21-19, and had a defensive tackle on my blind side come around. I'm getting ready to throw. He kind of chops my right arm, and I tear a rotator cuff.
Oh, gosh.
And back then, rotator cuffs now, for the most part, you go in, you have it fixed, you rehab it for 6 months, and you're good as gold. Back then, it was almost like a running back that had a bad knee. You just had a mark against you. So I already had a mark against my knee. Now I got a mark against my throwing shoulder. So it didn't go over well.
Right. Well, what an experience. So let's transition. And during all your football journey, you went through all that, and you had a great professional career. I think you're doing some high school coaching. Are you still doing that? Or I know you did.
In 2009, I'd been with the ad agency 31 years. And the previous 10 years, really the previous 6 years, I had been helping coach over at North Cobb High School. Good program, big school, and I was helping coach quarterbacks. Boy, I just felt like God was tugging on my heart. I mean, I love being around the kids. I love being around the coaches. 6 of those coaches were in my Sunday school class.
Right.
And the head coach is the one who came up and said, Terry, we need you to come out and help us. So I said, I'll do anything you want me to do. I said, I don't need to be paid. Whatever you got set aside, give it to somebody else. I don't need it. Right. I don't need it. Give it to somebody else. And I said, I'll do anything you want me to do. He said, okay. So after being there, I think it was 5 years maybe, had a new principal that came in, and he basically said, listen, thank y'all for your service, but you're not needed anymore. I'm bringing all my new coaches in. So all of us, and I hated leaving the kids and I hated leaving the coaches, but that was okay. Right. You know, that was okay. Right. And so I got asked to go over to a small Christian school in Roswell called Fellowship Christian. And they had started a football program 3 years previous to that. So I went over and helped Bob Lord for, I think it was 3 years. And then Bob retired. Well, again now, God's dealing with me. I mean, God's dealing with me too. You need to be involved with kids. Here I am. I'm the senior vice president of this ad agency, about a $400 million annualized ad agency. They had told me, you're going to be the next guy. And it really wasn't a downside. I would have had to move back to Cleveland. Of course, I'd lived in Cleveland, so that was not a big issue. Man, I told my wife, I said, honey, I believe I'm supposed to coach again. She said, you mean college? Of course, I had coached at Washington State and North Texas State between going to Cleveland after I graduated and going to Cleveland. And so I said, no, I think I'm supposed to coach in high school. She starts crying. She said, Terry, do you realize what kind of pay cut you'll take? I said, yes, I do. I said, I'll take a 76% pay cut. And she said, do you realize we got 3 children at Kennesaw State? I said, yes, I do. She said, gosh, I don't know. We got to pray about that. I said, well, pray with me. So I'm telling you, Bruce, my wife, I love her to death. If you look up security in the dictionary, need of, her picture is there. Right. And like most wives. Sure. I mean, like most wives. Sure. And I knew that. And I said, darling, I'm not going to do anything crazy. Well, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pray about this. So I got offered the head football job and athletic director's job at Fellowship Christian. And I'm praying. So the guy gives me a week. So I tell Janice, I said, pray, let's pray. Monday, I go to her and I say, on a continuum of 1 to 10, where are you on this? She said, oh, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you yet. She said, where are you? I said, I'm at a 1. She said, okay. We talk Wednesday. We go through that same little thing. We talk Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday morning, I've got to meet them and let them know what I'm going to do. So Friday, I'm going to work, getting out of the shower, putting my suit on. And I said, Janice, help me on this continuum where you are. She said, I'm a 10. I said, hold up. No way in the world you're a 10. She said, yes, I am. You're supposed to do this. I said, Janice, I'm at about a 2.5. So God is not a God of confusion. So he's not going to tell you something and not tell me something. She said, Terry, I've got such a peace about this. Bruce, I'm going to work and I have a Red Sea experience. I do. I mean, it became so clear to me that that's what I was supposed to do. So I got up the next morning and met with a gentleman. I said, I'll take it. So I went over to Fellowship. I think our first year we went 4-6, and my second year we went 2-8. But I had 31 players, and we had 21 of them that were freshmen and sophomores. So we got punched. But I will tell you this. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I am. I got fired after the second season. Started a FCA chapter there. We had 121 kids get saved. I mean, it had just broken out. Got called in, got fired. Not by the head of school. Got fired by the head of the board, head of school board. And he told me that you talk too much about Jesus and there's no Jesus in football. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, we've had kids get saved here. I said, your children have benefited, and all of a sudden you're telling me this. He said, that's right. He said, we don't want you.
This was a Christian school, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So it was amazing. My family was crushed. But you know what? I knew God was still in control. And I knew I did what I was supposed to do. My daughter said to me, Madison, She said, Dad, are you sure God told you? She's crying. Are you sure God told you to go over here? I said, absolutely. So clear. But he put me in some other places, and I'm better off for it.
Wow. I tell you, life can throw you some curves, and you walk out in faith that you got to be willing to lose to win. I figured that out.
Well, that is the truth. It is the absolute truth.
So let me ask you this. You got kids and grandkids, later generations not even born yet, who may listen to this. And once we put this podcast out there forever, after you and I are dead and gone, what do you want them to know about Terry Luck?
I would say to them that I am an avid believer in Jesus. He has shown himself to me in numerous ways. He is loving and caring and kind, and I spend my time now. I mean, I'm retired, even though my wife and I keep our 3-year-old granddaughter, so that's not real retirement.
Right.
But I spend my time now. I help with FCA up at Reinhardt University. I speak at men's conferences, at FCA things. I do a devotion every Monday morning up at Reinhardt with the football coaches. I do that because I want to do that. I'm involved in a ministry now over in Cartersville, and they help feed people and clothe people and find them housing. And I'm thinking, that's what we're supposed to do. We can't sit back. We cannot sit back and wait for pastors and deacons to go out and plant seeds and meet people where they are. We have to do that. We can't sit back on our haunches. I say it every Sunday in my Sunday school class. Guys, you be a God chaser. You go out and chase him. You grab the hem of his garment. You chase him. You know, good things are going to happen. God's going to use you. You don't have to have a whole lot of ability. You got to have a whole lot of availability. We are seed planters. And the thing is, there'll be somebody else that'll come along and water that seed, and there'll be somebody come along and fertilize it. And you know what? You may be a reason that you see them in heaven, and you may not even understand and realize how they get there. And at that point, you know what? It won't matter.
That is for sure. Terry, thank you so much, my friend.
Bruce, it's been wonderful.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.